very good morning, Bhavna, Manjeet. It's a pleasure to have you both with us for our second episode for a topic which is very close to our hearts, which is about women in leadership and, really getting two people representing two very different industries, very interesting career backgrounds also is going to be a very rich conversation. So we're really looking forward to spending the next, 45, 50 minutes with both of you. A quick introduction for the benefit of everybody. So Bhavna, who's joined us, she's the vice president at S&P Global, and she has a very rich 20-year career in HR. And has also been a past board member at NHRD and Delhi chapter. So such a pleasure to have you join us, Bhavna. Very excited.
Very happy to be here. Thank you, Aditi.
And we have Manjeet. Manjeet is the Chief People Officer at SKH Group, and he started his career in 1995. So that's a very rich 31 years of career there in HR across industries. Also, and I believe you started your career with ABB, yes. And then of course you've moved across industries. So yes. Very excited to have you also, Manjeet, with us, and we're really looking forward to this conversation. So without much ado, I think we will very quickly dive into really our topic at hand. While the topic at hand is about women in leadership, I think I'm going to step back a little bit and really talk about women in the workforce from the perspective of what we've seen. And if I'd probably invite Bhavna on your thoughts. So my question really out there is, in your 20 years rich career, what has been your observation? What is it that you've seen about the participation of women in the workforce? Anything that you've specifically seen, what you've learned? Very happy to hear that from you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I have to say, over the last 20 years, a lot has changed, right? And therefore, some impressions that stand out to me early in the journey, lots of energy, lots of passion, lots of commitment, going that extra mile. Some of the most terrific people leaders and managers that I've experienced have been, women leaders who've brought an incredible amount of emotional intelligence to the fold, along with all of their other skills and capabilities. And then somewhere, I know that the broken pipe is a little bit of a oft-used visual that's there, but somewhere between, let's say, that 10 odd years in the career and 15, 20 years in the career, something seems to change, right? And therefore the translation into a lot of heads of department, a lot of senior leaders, etc., the representation comparatively goes down. I think when I really think about women in the workforce, there are 2 or 3 elements that stand out to me. One is the element of skills. I have found, and I touched on this just a minute ago, this whole emotional intelligence aspect, right? Classically, there was a view that women as part of the workforce bring higher degrees of emotional intelligence. I do feel that sometimes that becomes a generalization. It's not always true, right? That isn't the genetic difference in DNA between the genders, right? And I find that there are people across all of our workforce who tend to bring very high degrees of emotional intelligence, but definitely the nurturing instinct. I find that leaders who've worked with nurturing women leaders earlier in their career, they tend to pick up that characteristic and sort of run with it in their own unique way. So that's one element that I have seen. The second element that I have seen is, and I'm being quite honest about this, is hesitation. We were having a conversation a few days ago about imposter syndrome. And I feel that sometimes as women, we tend to beat ourselves up a little bit more than we should be. Our confidence in ourselves sometimes, falters. And it falters because we are tough on ourselves, we are hard on ourselves, and we are holding ourselves to a very different standard. I also often feel that there is a lot of generalization on stages of life and what that means for women. I do believe that there are a lot of non-traditional choices that all genders are making today, right? And I feel some of those stereotypes are not necessarily useful or helpful when it comes to enabling women leaders to grow. And when I use the term leader, I believe you can be a leader with no experience because you have that influencing skill. So leadership and level in the hierarchy have no correlation. They are, however, linked to ability to influence, ability to create followership, ability to experiment and explore. And I do feel that sometimes as women, we may hesitate a little bit to say, is it really good enough? Am I really good enough? And that's both sad and a reality for us to sort of take cognizance of.
Mhm. Very interesting. And I'm very curious, Manjeet, what would be your take on some of the points that Bhavna put out there? And if I were to just very quickly summarize, there's a nature versus nurture that she alluded to. There's an emotional quotient that she alluded to. And the imposter syndrome. I have met a lot of men who also have imposter syndrome, but I'm very curious to hear, your experience on this.
Yeah, I think first of all, thanks, Bhavna. Very interesting points you make, and Aditi, thanks for also having me on this podcast. I think the topic on emotional intelligence, I think it's a hands down topic. I mean, the emotional intelligence that women bring, and we see it also in the workforce, but we see it closer home to in our families, in our community. I think it's hands down. So I think there is no two ways in looking at it. Very important aspect, emotional intelligence today, and Aditi, you would recognize it because that is the topic that we are working with at SKH, and a core essential part of that is also about the gender gap or the gender diversity gap, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I think I fully subscribe to the views that Bhavna has shared. There is an imposter syndrome. There is, like what we discussed the other day, I think yesterday only. What is that toxic positivity?
Positivity.
So yeah, we talk about agendas. We talk about agendas in terms of numbers when we should actually be talking about enablement. How are we going to enable the half of the world, and assuming that we are a 50-50 split between males and women. How are we going to enable in our companies, in our communities, also at home? How are we going to enable these young bright women to come into the workforce and then put them through that pipeline, whether it gets broken at a stage or not? That is for the leaders, and there the leadership role is not limited to the male or the men, on the leadership team, and therefore it's very important to get women in leadership roles also. Making it, if required, mandatory. Through affirmative actions, definitely. But very important, and I think if we kind of address and we build on putting a throughput at the entry level, and I say this very openly because we are in an industry which is very technical. There is a lot of sheet metal component at the shop floor. We have a lot of heavy things, heavy lifting that needs to be done, but nothing stops us, the people who are running the business, in finding those roles where we can really nurture, plug the talent gap. We complain about this talent war, but we don't do enough, by utilizing what is available. So I think it's very important that we start at the base and really work our ourselves up. Yeah, I think I would put it in that sense. Yeah.
If I were to just build on what you said, Manjeet, up until a point we were hearing, and specifically with the kind of industry that you're coming from on the shop floor in factories, up until a point there were not even basic facilities available for women.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
So how are you seeing that sort of evolve over a period of time? So I know it's a good agenda to have, that we do want to reduce the industry gap, but then there are challenges. I hear, for example, from some of my clients in terms of how they find it very hard to get women in some specific roles to join at an entry level as well.
Right.
So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that is where we have to lead from the front, and like they say, put your money where your mouth is. And you're absolutely right. When we started hiring young women at at the operations level, You know my colleague Vijay Yadav and Ashok you've met in Gujarat. Uh, we just took the decision saying that we will employ and we will do whatever it takes to, to see it through. And trust me, we are all alpha males. You've seen us, you worked with us, so you know that. But we were scared. I was scared. I was scared. We had concerns, and I think it worked well. I think we kind of took that first step, and today we have almost 20% on the shop floor in an obscure place like like Gujarat, Pechraji. We have almost 20-25% representation at the shop floor. And therefore now we are ensuring that all these women who had come in as as young operators, some of them will become line leaders. Hopefully, some of them will go through education, get a diploma or an engineering, and also then come into higher management staff cadre jobs. So yeah, I think we have to start from there. And we had a challenge on toilets. You rightly said. I mean, I'll be very candid about this. We didn't have our shop floor was not structured to employ quote unquote women because the only women's toilet we had was in the admin building. So we had to do a lot of structural changes, and we were committed to it, come what may. And but not without its fears. So I think it is fair to be fearful about it. But I think we were, we always talk about this first of a kind thing. So this was one of those first of a kind things that we had done, way back 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago. Yeah.
When I was listening to you, Manjeet, there's this very interesting story that came to my mind when we were just doing a workshop, a women leadership workshop, incidentally, for the Oberoi group a few months ago. And they were, the L&D head was actually sharing the story about how when the Oberoi hotels really came about, and Mr. Oberoi Senior went door to door to every home asking for families to send their daughters to come in and work at the Oberoi hotels. And that sort of challenges the stereotypes. And Bhavna, you and I were having that informal conversation before we really, got onto the podcast. Is really the stereotypes and the conditioning that has been there for many, many years. And yet there are people who are challenging that in their own way, in their own spheres. That, of course, doesn't take away from the broken pipe. I think that still continues to be a reality. And I know that even at the Oberoi hotels, that is a challenge that they're facing. But that said, I think the heart is in the right place to a large extent to say that, we would want to be in an equal opportunities sort of space. And we all know how demanding a hospitality industry is as well, just like a manufacturing. But if we were to just come to your industry, Bhavna, services, sort of industry, technology, what are some experiences that you've had in terms of enhancing the participation of women at the workplace?
Yeah. And maybe I'll take a slightly broader view, Aditi, and not limited just to financial services. I do believe that even today there are a bunch of stereotypes that we've got to really look in the face and fight. One of the biggest stereotypes is men are more oriented to sales roles. Definitely frontline field sales roles, right? Similarly, are they slightly better at deal making? Because I heard this when I used to be in consulting. There are a lot of deals that get struck on golf courses, right? And to me, I personally would rather enjoy the brunch than sort of toilet out with 18 holes of golf, which both my father and brother enjoy. But those are personal choices, and when personal choices become the basis for generalization, I don't think it lands really well. Some of the most impactful people in commercial roles, for example, whether it's new logos, whether it is relationship mining, it is the skills that differentiated them, not their gender, right? I think even in financial services, actually across industries, you often hear about this term that gets used, which is it's a boys' club, right? And it's almost okay for it to be a boys' club. Why is it okay for it to be a boys' club? Organizations at the end of the day are manifestations of our social context.
True. So true.
Right? we cannot expect organizations to fix things if socially we are not in a space where those things are going to get acceptable or those things are going to be okay. You gave such a beautiful example of Mr. Oberoi inviting families to to encourage their daughters to join the group. I think across board, if you look at the armed forces who are now inviting women to be a part of it in a space that was traditionally completely all about men, right? I do believe that there are a lot of experiments that are being done. And some of these, the reason I continue to call them experiments is because we're still learning from them. We're learning about what will it take to set it up for success, because it's not, the bringing women in is the easy part of it comparatively. It's the helping them feel comfortable, enabling them to grow, enabling them to feel safe, not just psychologically, but physically and at every other level, enabling them to feel valued for what they bring to the table. All of those are really important, right? That is as true for gender representation as it is, for example, for abilities representation. So many organizations talk about the fact that we are doing diversity hiring, which is fantastic. It's not the hiring. It's the setting up for success that is absolutely vital. And my my pushback to a lot of colleagues is the rhetoric is fantastic. The lip service is really good. But when you really look at how successful are you, isn't it interesting that we were able to find a vaccine for COVID in 18 months, and we've been speaking about gender equality for decades, and we're still speaking about it?
Yeah.
Why is it that this Women in Leadership banner still says what's missing? Why aren't we talking about what's thriving? Why do we wish women on Women's Day? When people wish me, I say happy every day, because every day is ours. It doesn't matter what gender you are in. So I think some of these stereotypes on roles and gender, I think those exist, which really need to be thought of very differently, right? The couple of specific examples that I will also give is, over a period of time, there's a little bit of shift that is manifested. But when you look at P&L ownership roles, and you look at the relative representation of the genders, you will find there is a skew.
Yeah.
And that skew is not based on skill. It is not based on ability to be successful. It is based on opportunity. It is based on overgeneralization sometimes, and just discomfort with taking a risk. That's what I really feel.
Manjeet, what are your thoughts on the generalization that we've sort of touched on?
Right. I think it exists. I think by not, taking it into cognizance, we're only kidding ourselves. I think that generalization is there. An element of measured fearlessness is required. So if we are talking about it as a skill, then that skill has to be imparted equally to anyone who's working in the organization, including women, And as they say, as they used to always say, the best may the best man win. I think that mindset first has to change. The best person has to win. You have to give as an organization the equal opportunity in terms of inculcating measured fearlessness, for instance, as a behavior, as an attitude, as a trait, and then drive it from that perspective. And it's not easy. Definitely, I want mince words saying that it is easy. It is something that we'll all have to work hard towards. But if you kind of inculcate in your DNA this measured fearlessness and this ability to take risks, then why not? No system is so fragile. Whether it's a sales-oriented system or a technically, production-oriented system like ours, that we take a decision and the hell is going to break loose. No, I think that mindset we have to get out of. That is what leadership is there for. And again, I don't want to generalize it, but that is what the leadership role is there for. take the risks, make sure that you have ring fence them, and make sure that your objective of making that person, that woman shine has to be at the forefront. I think that is an orientation that we are taking within SKH. We are talking, we have 5 FOPs right now, fields of play, core businesses. And again, I don't want to sound, rhetorical also by saying it on when we celebrated the International Women's Day, at corporate, in the same place that we were there yesterday. Vice Chairman, Mr. Sunandan Kapoor, announced that the next FOP 6, will be led by a woman. So, and this was, with 100 women sitting there, and obviously the entire leadership team, including me. It was through my speech. It was during my speech that he said that the next FOP that we are going to build has to be headed by a woman. And I think for me that is a direction, that is a commitment, and now we've got to make it happen. Not we got to make it happen. So good. I think it's very important that we also, put our money where our mouth is, and work it. And again, going back to the basics, we have to really be able to create the enablement, the mindset change, at that level, at every level, which then makes this as a no-brainer. The best person for the job is, I think that we have to get to. So, it's going to take time, and I won't be overly enthusiastic in saying that we'll do it next year. No, it is going to take time, but it will happen. We will put more realistic plans. We have to do the micro planning, and then we have to kind of guide, do whatever it takes. But it will happen. That is very clear. So I think that is our commitment in terms of building it at SKH, and then through our ESG programs, like you mentioned about Mr. Oberoi, that is exactly what we are doing also. In our remote plants, we are actually engaging with the panchayats and telling their leaders, and some of the panchayats also have women leaders, which is also great. Telling them that we are a safe employment zone. Your young women, girls, they will have a career with us. Till they want to work, and we are also very mindful. Social pressures, society will also take its turn. So he said, don't worry about it. We are there to support. But it is a two-way street. So there is preparation. It's like farming. You have to till the land, put the fertilizer, and then wait and watch for it to grow, and also then protect it. Most important.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we are doing our bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very
Aditi, if I can just take a minute. Manjeet, I love the term considered fearlessness, right? I think it's absolutely so beautifully put. And there were, as you were talking, there was an example that came to my mind. In a previous organization that I was with in the consulting space, there was actually an analysis that was done of when the annual performance write-ups are created. Is there reasonable similarity in the language that is used for high performance, high potential colleagues from both genders, right? And there was a world of difference. While one gender, and no prizes for guessing which is which, but maybe we'll try. While one gender was described as assertive, initiative-taking, firm, able to guide decision-making, able to drive action. The other gender was described as sometimes having too much of a view, aggressive in the face of pushback, trying to work through the channels. Think about which is which, and think about people who are achieving or exceeding the same goals, right? We have, if we grow up in a scenario where young girls are told, don't go out at night alone, you need to have somebody to protect you, then when they come into organizations, the view is you have to have someone to protect you and tell you what to do. And that's not okay. That is not okay. And therefore, when I look around at some of the work that is even being done in primary and higher education, I think today our role as corporates, and I feel particularly proud of the work that S&P also does in this space. We're partnering with several educational institutions across the spectrum to really look at how can we take skills earlier in the journey, but how can we also take mindsets earlier in the journey?
Yes,
How
most
can
important.
we, absolutely, how can we have role models up there? You can't talk about women empowerment and have only men doing the talking. It's disingenuous.
Yeah.
Who are the role
Very.
models that you have, these young minds who are coming into their own to really look up to, right? And I think it is that today our responsibility, and you can tell from the next example I'm going to give that I'm a huge MasterChef Australia fan. Farm to table is not just a culinary concept. As organizations, if we want to really grow the opportunity for everybody, every demographic to have opportunity in our organizations, we need to go back to the farm and we need to help till the farm. What does that mean? That means invest our time in ensuring curriculum gets shaped in a way that is relevant. Spending our time for whoever is passionate, everybody doesn't have to do it, but go back and teach, have practical labs, right? Provide internships, provide the opportunity for people to come and experience your ecosystem. Now, there will be limitations because you have to ensure data privacy, security, all of that, which you owe your customers. But how can you help till the soil was the term that Manjeet used. How can you help till the soil? If you wait for people to come into your organization, that soil is pretty tilled and it's pretty set in its ways.
Yes.
Earlier in the journey, when they are at the farm, how are we helping with mindset, skill set, role models? How are we encouraging courage versus saying, hold on, you can't do this alone? It's worth thinking about.
You know, you remind me of the time when Kalpana Chawla, went into space and how that sort of changed the narrative dramatically, in our country, because suddenly we had a role model of a woman, which is also, the case with the armed forces. And, I was reading this story about one of the naval officers who lost her life in 2015, the first woman ever to lose her life in the line of duty. How that narrative starts to shape. In the Republic Day parades, we're seeing more and more of women contingents now coming in, and I really that gives me a lot of hope in terms of just the narrative shifting, and yet there is something that is sort of missing, right? And if I were to just sort of pick up what both of you have spoken about, I agree, Bhavna, when you say that our organizations are a manifestation and a representation of what our society is. So I think in the larger cities that we live, I think we still talk more equity and more equality than a lot of the other places, because the social conditioning is still not up there. We're also hearing about saying, we have to give back. There is something that we have to do to pay it forward, because it's a responsibility that we all have. So there has to be commitment, there has to be intent. And I think they also, with a lot more intent, have the right ecosystem. So that language that we have, and Bhavna, I loved it when you talked about the assertive versus aggressive. And you're right, no prizes for guessing. It's very obvious, who gets what. But really, I think that whole, dynamic of the double bind and the role congruity, which is existing in the system, because of the conditioning that we've had over the years, has a certain interplay on what we're doing. And when I was reading this research, which said it'll take us another 123 years or some such weird number to really have equal participation in the workplace. I'm like, oh my goodness, another 123 years is just way too far out. And I think it's really important for us to say that, how are we going to contribute and make a difference? So in that same sort of vein, what are some things, Bhavna, that enabled you to navigate your career? So I'm going to hear the woman's voice first, and then I'll go to Manjeet to say, what is it that, you individually, personally, Manjeet, over the last 3 decades of your career that you have done, so just Bhavna, over to you to see how you navigated your career as you went around.
I'm always asked this question, and I have to be very transparent in saying I haven't done much of navigation. I've been and I have a lot of gratitude for that. I've been very lucky to have mentors who saw something in me, who nurtured that. I've been very lucky to have leaders who saw something in me and gave me opportunities to see if that something turns into something more. And that really has been the journey. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. When between my graduation and my MBA, I actually wanted to join the Foreign Service. I come from a defense background. I've got generations of the forces on both sides of my family, maternal and paternal. I wanted to join the Foreign Service, become a diplomat. In hindsight, I really wish I was part of the diplomatic corps more often than not. I think the external affairs minister often does a fabulous job, and his rhetoric is really incredible. But somehow that going to Jawaharlal Nehru University and doing international relations did not materialize for whatever reason. I ended up working for a couple of years, did business process reengineering in a firm that was, it was a startup firm. It was run by a colleague and friend of my father's. And I ended up learning that no matter how fancy your presentations and your strategy, if your people are not aligned, you're not going to get anything done. You're not going to grow. You are going to remain stagnant. And therefore, how do you unlock human energy and human passion in everything that you do? That's where the momentum for growth comes from. And I went on to do my MBA. After my MBA, I had the option of joining an organization in what would have been, a more traditional HR stream. This was a leading organization, and it would have meant that I started out with with industrial relations, as was normal for a lot of trajectories, and then go on from there. And the second option that I had was joining Grow Talent, which was set up and being led by Anil Sachdev, starting with consulting. The overwhelming advice that I got was don't start with consulting. I started with consulting. Best decision ever. Best decision ever. I got to work with diverse organizations, diverse contexts. I got challenged every day. More importantly, I worked with leaders like Anil Sachdev, Shabir Merchant, Prasenjit Bhattacharya, and so many others, who really, Meenal Jadhav, so many who really showed me what the alignment between head and heart and soul is all about. What does purpose mean in terms of, really bringing that plus to whatever it is that you do. So that was one fantastic part of my journey. And from there, I learned that trust your intuition. Because your intuition, it doesn't matter how many years of experience or life you have. Each one of us has intuition. We just listen to it or we don't listen to it, right? But trust your intuition, hear it out, see what it's telling you. And that is what I've done. All through my career, I've trusted my intuition. That led me from Grow Talent to SHL to Genpact, which was my first ever HR job internally and not as a consultant, back to consulting at PwC and then at IHS Markit, which has become S&P Global. I think the second experience that I'll really talk about, Aditi, is it's important to think about what kind of experiences you would really like exposure to. And then ensure that you create networks of influence so that opportunities come your way.
Mm.
Right? We don't live in a world of career paths anymore. My career is my choice. No, not my manager's choice, not my organization's choice. We live in a world of career lattices, which means that at any point of time, and I've done that, right? I was in consulting in a P&L role. I came into an internal HR context, did a COE, did a HR partner, went back to consulting, came back, have done multiple roles within the S&P Global context. It's not about, that whole focus on title and position, focus on skills. In fact, there is a very senior leader at Grow Talent who's now retired, but Shailendra ji always used to say, focus on your work, success will come. He continues to say that even today. And I genuinely believe in it. If you create value, there's no reason why people won't want you at their table. But if your point of departure is give me a seat at the table, chances are it's going to be perfunctory at best, right? It's not going to be respected as much as when you earn it. So that's the other thing that I would talk about, which is each one of us, I was at, I think it was Delhi School of Economics a few months ago, and I asked the students there, how long is enough to be a CEO? Nobody wanted to go more than 10 years, but some young colleagues in the audience felt 2 or 3 years is more than enough to be CEOs, and more power to them, right? I think audacity and ambition is phenomenal, but you've got to back up audacity and ambition with value add, with the ability to get it done. And it doesn't matter how senior you are, your ability to roll up your sleeves and say, let me get this done, your ability to be in the trenches with your people, specifically in tough times, specifically when people are feeling like they can't do it. I think that's the other thing that I've experienced and which I've tried to incorporate in my life as well. And maybe the third example of learning of this career that I will give is, there was a time, and this will sound hilarious. I think when I graduated from MDI after my MBA, my picture of success for myself was to be partner in a large consulting firm before 40, to be traveling the world on my own steam. And for some reason, black coffee was the flavor of that image, right? Having got there, I realized today that and I'll use a word in Hindi, the paribhasha of success has changed over the last few years. The paribhasha of success today is about how much of energy can I unlock around me? How much can I help people believe that they can do anything that they set their mind to? And that it doesn't matter what your position is, it doesn't matter where in the hierarchy you are valued. And if you are able to deliver, you will get all of the opportunities. I think mentoring people to be that successful, that's my other learning and the paribhasha of success for me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Bhavna. That was inspiring. And Manjeet, bringing the spotlight onto you now.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Bhavna, and it's I remember. I think Grow Talent. I was also there, and I know Mr. Shilender. You're talking about great gentleman, very good foresight. If I talk about it from my point of view, I think I had the good fortune again to work with leaders who were very clear on this agenda, even in the engineering-based companies that we operated in. So we had a typical management training scheme, and even those days we made sure that we would hire as many women as we could get, provided they got into the merit, and then we'd try to give them careers. Now the facts we have to also be mindful of. So the facts are that some of the senior HR leaders and these people I worked with, they were of the view that we should limit the number of women we get there because girls will get married, blah blah blah. And I remember one of the senior leaders say in an open meeting to that gentleman, and I'll again use Hindi, Mr. XXX, आप गांव वाले की तरह मत बोला करो, मत सोचा करो. So this is way back, mid 90s, early part of my career, and for me that was it was very inspirational that the leader, and we didn't have many women in engineering back then. But the vision that was cast and therefore the inspiration that was set upon me was very clear. And coming back to my working life, I've always tried to ensure that I have as many women on my team as possible. I've led all women teams, so that's been a pleasure. There are challenges to leading all women teams. Let me also put the caveat up front. I think that is always a learning. There's something that then that challenges your leadership style or your managerial style. So, apart from that learning, but I think that inspiration that I drew upon, kind of really helped me to set in the behaviors that we are looking at, when we are looking at, bringing women on board. We talk about the broken pipe. It's a big here and now. It happens. We know that. How do we kind of fix that broken pipe? How do we utilize it to our favor? I think those are all things that we have looked at behaviorally. And I would go back again, Aditi, to this measured fearlessness. I mean, it was not there 5 years ago in terms of a phrase, but I think one has to be fearless, in a measured way to be able to take these decisions because these are all multi-dimensional impacts. You may have a DEI program. You may have certain metrics. You may have a certain mold that you're looking at for your leaders, and therefore for the young women leaders that we are trying to push into our systems. But it's a two-way street, and life is life. Yeah, things happen, priorities change, and it's all fair. What I want to say to that is that irrespective of that, we will continue to drive at SKH. Me personally, as a senior part of the team, we will continue to drive it, irrespective of whatever quote unquote leakage will happen. That is very clear. So when Vice Chairman, when Mr. Kapoor says that we need to have an FOP run by a women leader, so that is inspiration in a way which definitely will require a lot of minds, heads, behaviors, stereotypes to be broken, and all the best to us. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Two things that I've heard from the two voices that I have with me today. One is while the ecosystem is also doing so, there are places, companies like SKH that are really putting the intent and the ecosystem to support women. I don't think that we as women can absolve ourselves of our responsibility to also be mentors and role models for who are going to come after us. And I think that's really important. And it was very interesting, Bhavna, when you said that you didn't really navigate your career. Somewhere many years later, after my 2 decades in the corporate world, and one of the first sort of sessions I went to, which was supposedly a women leadership. And I say that in quotes because I was fairly concerned about it. And I walked into the session, and for some very weird reason, it felt like a male bashing session. And I found that very uncomfortable. And I was like, I'm not sure this is how I, understand what we're really trying to say about having women be equally represented in leadership positions. And then they said, oh, but did you never ever face any bias? Weren't people biased against you? And I was like, I don't know. I don't think it was a bias. I just did what I had to do. And they're like, didn't you have to work harder? Didn't you have to work longer? I said, but I did that of my own choice. Yes, I worked very long hours. But that was something those were choices that I made because I knew the future that I wanted to create for myself. My own aspirations were what were really important. So I think sometimes you're also getting conditioned to start thinking about this. And a lot of those pieces in the larger system. And I think that's why all of these conversations need to become more and more mainstream, to really put it out there saying that it's not that people wake up in the morning because they have something against you. It's just that they don't know any better. And we all have to, give everybody the opportunity to become more aware and more conscious of the impact that they create with the behaviors that they show up with, which, as I said, a lot of times is just unconscious because that's the way they were conditioned, right? So I think that really rests on us as a key responsibility as human beings, irrespective of our genders. I mean, my son is great in the kitchen. My daughter wouldn't want to spend a day in the kitchen, right? Which is absolutely fine. For a lot of reasons, that could be a role reversal for what you may. But that's fine, right? And we're okay with that. And in fact, we would rather encourage it. So I think it's really incumbent on each one of us as well in our own circles of influence, in our own spheres that we exist in. What is the difference that we are making over there? So I find that very heartening to hear from both of you as to how you're leading the way in what you are doing and really, talking about these things more and more. So that's really what I'm very excited about. Yes, Bhavna.
Aditi, I really wanted to share this example with you. A few years ago, when the administration in a certain major superpower changed, and it became unfashionable for organizations to have DEI teams and to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, so on and so forth. At that point of time, our chief people officer at S&P, Girish Ganesan, and our CEO, Martina Chung, they emphasize that it doesn't matter what the metrics are.
Correct.
What we need to inculcate is a culture of respect. When you talk about a culture of respect, and when you talk about being people forward in your philosophy, I do believe inclusion and belonging, which, by the way, are often not focused on as much as diversity as a metric is focused on. But when you focus on a culture of respect and truly being people forward in your practices, I think that's when a lot of what we are talking about comes to life. And let me give you a couple of very, very tangible examples. At S&P, even before a number of regulations came into this effect, we have 6 months of parental leave available to all colleagues. It doesn't matter whether you're a mother or a father. It doesn't matter whether you've adopted or you've delivered. What matters is that your family is growing, and your family, we recognize, is a part of the whole. And as we say, we bring our whole selves to work, right? Putting that practice in place was no mean feat, because you can, of course, you will talk about the fact that that's 6 months of productivity, 6 months of protection, etc., etc., etc. But today it's an accepted practice. It is a practice that talks about respect and being people forward. The second very, very important thing that we do, like most organizations, we may not publish a whole host of metrics. By the way, we are one of the few organizations in the world that has a public impact report every year. For the last, I think, 3 odd years, we've been doing a public impact report that talks about all of the impact that we have, and that also acknowledges the efforts that we are trying to take to drive a lot of parity in different demographics, right? That is putting your money where your mouth is. That is being transparent and being accountable to your ecosystem about what this really means. And the third example, sorry, I will stop after this third example, but the third example that I really want to give you is career coaching. What typically happens is standard practices career coaching is an investment that organizations do to critical talent and leaders at a certain stage and above. S&P is one of a handful of organizations where we have an in-house team of career coaches that is, by the way, ICF certified. And coaching is available to every single member of our 40,000 people workforce spread across 40 plus countries, irrespective of level, irrespective of any demographic. Why? Because that input for growth, the earlier on you start leveraging it, the more you can set yourself up for success. And it is access to opportunities. That's why we think of our learning ecosystem not as training paths, but as a bouquet of options which people can pick and choose from based on what is their need, how do they learn, what is relevant, what pace do they want to work at. And that is where that value comes. But at the end of the day, it gets summed up by, what Girish talks about as being a culture of respect consistently. And what we talk about, we accelerate essential intelligence by being people forward, which means high performance expectations, but high enablement. And it's striking that balance that helps people grow.
Fantastic. I'm going to do a quick rapid fire with both of you, and I'm going to go to Manjeet. Manjeet, my first question to you, actually, my rapid fire question to you is 3 things that you believe women can do and men can do to improve the representation of women in leadership positions.
Okay. 3 things is, I think, coaching, becoming role models. That is very important. And I think I look at coaching and versus having conversations at every level in the organization as two different things. I
Sure.
think more women and therefore men also need to have more conversations around these topics, because I still come from the belief that we have to start changing the behavior. Once we start, tackling the behavior, the inclusion, diversity, tools, metrics, whatever we call it, those will change. And I've also seen, I was part of a non-Indian, let me put it this way, as a non-Indian group company, and for them, diversity was having somebody from India on their leadership or so-called leadership team. Candidly, it was very nice, but you can have diversity as a tool. You can use diversity as a tool, and most often, sometimes people use it more for photo ops. But the fact is that you have to build the inclusion with that diversity. So I feel, coaching again, coaching, mentoring, having these conversations, and being role models is very important. Yeah.
Bhavna, same question comes your way. My rapid fire, three things that we can do to improve representation of women in leadership.
The first one is check bias at the door.
Mm.
The second one is change your narrative from pedigree to skill. And the third one is invest early in the journey. Go back to basics, invest early in the journey.
Absolutely.
Yes. I think that was so rich. Thank you so much for your top three tips. I think that really is what it boils down to eventually. And I think as much as I agree that we must begin early and all of that, and I think that's what we're also seeing with the upcoming generations, that there's a lot more clarity in terms of the careers that they want and how they approach their professional lives. And I'm very hopeful that we will have an equitable world. And it will not take us 123 years to get there, is what my firm belief is. And I think each one of us is, because we're all committed to do our bit. So, and that is really what is going to change the world. So thank you both so much for joining us today. That was a very rich conversation. We've got a lot of learnings from everything that you've shared with us. And we will continue the dialogue in some form and shape, not necessarily only equity in the genders or all genders that are out there, but just in terms of what we know that we can make a difference standpoint to just the world around us and tapping into the human potential. So thank you so much for being such great partners with Aarohan, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. Happy day ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you.